Okay, just got a few people joining us. Morning, Lucy. Morning, Carl. Feel free to turn your cameras on. It's quite early, so maybe you don't want to do that quite yet. Okay, so we'll make a start. Good morning, Alicia. Good morning, Karon. Lovely to see you both.
Morning. Morning.
Um, so before we get into it, do you want to just do a brief introduction about yourselves and how you've kind of come to intersect with the Oak and NSEAD art and design resources? Do you want to start, Karen?
I have had the privilege of working collaboratively, should I say, with Emily, and having the opportunity to use the art resources because I am a network lead for a Lift Schools, and it's an academy trust. And we had a really awesome session where Emily introduced the Oak National Resources to our network, our trust. And since then, I've just been really, really, really keen to kind of use them and really keen to share my practice and how I've been using them. But yeah, it's been a fantastic resource to have and a great introduction. I can't think of a better resource at the moment for myself. So.
That's amazing. Thank you. Alicia.
So obviously I'm Alicia. I worked with Oak as a freelancer and I was a subject pedagogy reviewer. So obviously that's quite a strange name. So really essentially, like many of you, my background was in art education from got a history of kind of primary and secondary teaching. So my role was to look at the resources that came in. So usually it would be the decks and obviously all the other components that come along with that, the quizzes, etc., that would come in from the team of teacher creators. And I would look at them sequentially and check for things like continuity, check that there was an increase really in the challenge that was going through the lessons, depth, complexity. So I was really looking for like a vertical kind of coherence of the curriculum and the building up of skills and sort of knowledge as it goes through, because our curriculum runs from Key Stage 1. So really you're looking at how those skills build up all the way up to sort of Key Stage 4 curriculum. So that was the key thing, was looking at how we were kind of sequentially growing the complexity of the lessons, and that knowledge, etc., was sound like throughout the whole curriculum. So I think that was my main role, was looking for continuity, sequencing, and obviously accuracy of information as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And like you said, the resources go from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 4. And there's over 500 lessons in total. So you will have had eyes on almost, if not all, of those
Yeah,
lessons.
there's a lot of lessons.
A lot of lessons. And Karen, obviously you're the network lead, and it's like 20 plus secondary schools, isn't it? Is that
Yeah,
right?
within our
And you're focusing at the minute on the Key Stage 3 resources and how they can support your different settings in different ways. So we just wanted to sort of start by talking about the adaptability of the lessons. I think one of the misconceptions maybe about the Oak resources is that they might be a sort of off-the-shelf resource and that you have to use them as they are, which is absolutely not the case. Like one of the most wonderful things about the resources is that we made them to a really high quality. You can use them as they are, but you can also really make them bespoke for your setting and bring a bit of your kind of personality as an art teacher and your kind of ideas and thoughts about what you want your students to be learning and doing. You can bring that to the resources. So I don't know if Alicia, maybe you want to start by speaking a bit. Obviously, you've had eyes on all the lessons. So what would you say about the kind of adaptability of our art and design lessons?
I think actually that was a good point, Emily, because I think that was also something I was really looking for when I was looking through the lessons, was just checking that they are able to sort of speak to individual teachers, and it's not too much of one teacher's own opinion. So I think the lessons are formed in a way that you can take them and you don't feel like you're being given somebody else's lesson and you're sort of like, oh, I don't really understand what they're talking about, or oh, that's going too much in one person's personal direction. So they work beautifully as like a standalone lesson. But I think where they really become enriched is when you can download them, and then it's so easy to just sort of remove things or add things. And I think the adaptability comes in many different ways. I mean, you can adapt the artists by adding in different artists that you think are, I suppose, relevant maybe to your local setting, or that resonate more with your own sort of cohort of students. You can find somebody that it might be that there's a particular artist that you love, and you know that, if you're teaching, collage and you're looking at pop art, for instance, you might decide that there's somebody that that you really want to include. It might be that you're lucky enough to have a visiting artist or somebody that's local, or a parent that you might want to sort of include in the deck. So artists is one way you can adapt. There's also, even down to things like the tasks, all of the text, you can either sort of just leave it as it is, or you can edit things by changing. It might be slight changes in language. It might be that at your school there's certain sort of key vocabulary or themes that you want to come through and resonate within your own decks. So all of it can be sort of adapted. And I think the idea really is that you're trying to, I suppose, if you want to, you're trying to adapt it so that it is something that speaks to your own sort of cohort of kids that you've got there, your own learners, and something that they can kind of connect with. So I think hopefully it'll be exciting, I suppose, as time goes on, to see maybe people that have adapted their own lessons and to see how they've done it, a bit like actually Karon has actually.
Yeah, exactly. And just to flag, I think we said it in the last breakfast brush up, which was more about the kind of principles behind the curriculum and why NSEAD chose to work with Oak on this, and about that partnership. But we mentioned there about the sort of 20 plus team of content creators that we had, and they all came with different specialisms, and of course all come with different personalities. But I think that's a really good point you made there about, I think we've all probably had that experience of being given someone else's lesson to teach, and I don't know about you too, but I always feel a bit like I can never do that. I always need to add a little bit of my own touches to it. So that's a really good point, that with the Oak resources, they're really high quality and they're so rich and dynamic, yet somehow we've managed to not make them feel like something's being imposed upon you, which it's quite a sweet spot to have hit. So obviously, Karon, thank you, Aletia. Obviously, Karon, you have been in the doing, you're in the classroom very much still, and you've been adapting some of the lessons for your setting. So would you speak a bit to the adaptability and how you've encountered that as a teacher?
Well, I found it quite easy. There wasn't a difficult thing about it. I think it's self-explanatory. When you go onto the website and you select the unit, you will see the lesson, the deck, and you are able to download it as Google Slides, which is very compatible to what my workplace uses. So for me, it was a straight download and able to, cut and paste. And I felt that it wasn't something that was designed to a specific way to teach. It was quite open, which made me have a bit of autonomy on how I could use it. And I felt that was very useful. I quite liked the language. The language is very student friendly, so it's easy to kind of digest. It's broken down in quite a logical, chronological and logical order, and is very deliverable. I didn't do much editing with the text. It was more with the imagery, like Aletia stated before, kind of finding things that I would think would be relevant to my students' interests and what would kind of spark their kind of engagement. But I definitely didn't find it a difficult process, and I would encourage people to at least try before they almost dismiss it as something that's not useful. I think it's definitely, even if you're not necessarily going to use the Oak resource, is good kind of confirmation You know, that what you're doing, you know, because a lot of the facts and that kind of stuff that I have in my slides, in my deck, was the same as.
Yeah.
However, I preferred the style of Oak, you know.
Mm,
So
mm.
that was a choice that I made. I thought, let me just kind of break it down a bit more as the Oak resources
Yeah.
have, rather than kind of overwhelming them with a big chunk of information with no imagery, that kind of stuff. So it kind of gave me a bit of reflection time as well.
Mm.
I know I'm doing it right, but how can I do it better? You know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So yeah, it's I think it's a easily adaptable resource. You don't feel as if you're changing the world too much, especially if you want to feel like your stuff is really precious. You
Mm.
can just take what you need and
Mm.
maybe just get a bit of confirmation that you are on the right track. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like, thank you, Karon. And I think, the Oak resources, these were about 2 years in the making. And, we've all been in the classroom as teachers, and with the best will in the world, there's limited time that you can spend on making resources, really. And a lot of that time, I think for most art teachers, is spent outside of school time, even if you want to make them look really good and get that coherence and that rich, dynamic subject knowledge in there. But each of the Oak lessons had a minimum of 8 to 10 hours spent on it, which, with the best will in the world, no teacher really can do that for every single lesson. So, there's a reason why all that stuff comes through when you engage with a lesson. It's because it's had amazing people designing it, lots of people reviewing and checking it, and lots of time spent on it.
the
And
lessons are well considered. They
yeah,
do well considered. Like, you know, there's a lot going on in there, and
yeah.
yeah, they do feel like he's kind of ticked a lot of boxes for a lot of people. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, even if I'm sure within classrooms, there are so many amazing lessons going on and so much amazing teaching going on in
Mm.
every single art department and in every single art lesson. But like you said, it's all also quite useful to look at the way we've done things and think, oh, okay, maybe I could introduce a bit more of that disciplinary knowledge, or maybe I could diversify the artists a bit more that I'm teaching when I look at that topic. So there's something for everyone, which sounds like a cliche
Yeah,
thing to say, but it's true.
yeah.
You very kindly shared with me your version of one of our year 6 pop art units, which I think is a really interesting one, because I think pop art gets kind of wheeled out a lot, doesn't it, in primary and secondary schools, because the imagery is obviously quite accessible and eye-catching, and it's like really good to get that initial engagement from students. But I think this is a unit that I really, really love within the Oak content, because it takes pop art so much further than perhaps is tempting to do when you're teaching about pop art. But you've taken that year 6 unit, and I know you don't actually teach year 6, but so do you. What we'll do is we'll share the Oak resource. So I'll share screen and put the Oak version up. And while I'm doing that, I don't know, maybe if you want to describe a bit about why you initially even went to that resource for your setting, because you don't teach year 6.
Mhm.
So can you see the Oak slides?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the history of pop art. First lesson in this unit about new pop art sculpture and mixed media. And while I'm doing this, obviously, anyone who hasn't seen the Oak slides is getting a sense of how they look. So yeah, Karon, why did you decide to choose this pop art
Um,
unit for your class?
I think it was, again, it's something that I teach secondary school, so I teach Key Stage 3, and obviously this is a Key Stage 2 resource, being a year 6 resource. But I thought, again, how it was, how the content itself was broken down, would be more accessible for my boys who have SEND needs. So I work in a school for boys who have SEMH and SEND needs. So it's about how I could deliver quite a lot of information, because pop art is quite a big topic. It's not a small movement. It's quite a hefty movement, and I wanted it to be something where they wouldn't get bored by a lot of kind of teacher talk. You know, I wanted something that had, well, I thought my slides initially it was a lot of teachers talk. So I wanted to find a resource within Oak that could help me to break it down, to make it be more engaging. And what I really liked about this resource was the kind of pop quizzes or the knowledge checks that were kind of dotted around. I just saw, as you're here, Emily, I thought they were fantastic, because I think for our boys who find it hard to retain information, because of their various needs, it's a good way to kind of give them the opportunity to unlock some of the knowledge, or to kind of, you know, demonstrate some of the knowledge that they've just learned or they just received.
Do you mind if I just quickly explain about what these are, just for anyone who hasn't seen the Oak? Thank you. So on the top right-hand corner, you can see it says check, which is a check for understanding. And like Karon said, these are dotted around the slide deck after explanation slides. And exactly like Karon said, they're there to test. They're there for that quick retrieval. And they're not always, fact retrieval. Sometimes they're more to do with the technique that's being used, the process. So obviously, checks for understanding appear in all the subjects in Oak. So you'll see them in maths lessons, science lessons, etc. And within art, one of the misconceptions would be that, art isn't about fact recall and things like that. But like you just said, actually, when you're teaching a lesson and all the art movements, I like what you said there, like it's a hefty movement. There's a lot, isn't there, in an art lesson? You could be talking about the historical context, the artist, the technique, the task that the students are going to do. So having these quick checks for understanding, dotted throughout the explanation slides is really effective. And I'm glad that it's useful for your SEND setting as well.
And I think it's a really good way to kind of because one of my tasks is to give them a quiz about pop art in my own planning, in my own slides, in my deck. So the idea of having a little taste of a quiz before you get to your bigger quiz it just worked for me quite nicely, So I found when I opened it up and I went through it, I thought, a lot of this I could use. There were some bits, I thought I had to work on. So when it comes to the imagery, I had to really kind of go out there and find things that I knew would appeal to my students and would keep them engaged. But I mean, in terms of the actual writing and the content of the lesson, the knowledge of the deck, it was exactly what I needed. And I was able to kind of implement my own tasks, use some of the tasks that were on the slides as well, the deck as well.
I'll just flag. So this is now your slide deck, and I'll just kind of scroll through a bit so people get a sense of obviously there's a initial kind of like massive design change, which makes it more kind of eye-catching and engaging for your students. So this is your lovely slide. And I've focused in just on some of the changes. So this is, I wondered if you wouldn't mind speaking to kind of some of these changes. So Oak lessons have learning cycles, which you can see the different kind of coloured shapes here, and those correspond with the top of each slide. So you can see which learning cycle you're in, whether you're in a purple cycle or a green cycle, and obviously they have names. And that kind of structure was slightly changed in yours.
Yeah, and that's the reason being is that we have stages of learning within my school. So as much as I really enjoy the structure of Oak, I still have to, comply to my school's kind of structures of learning as well. So we have stages of learning where we have to do like a connect activity. Some people may call it a starter activity. We do representation, which is where we kind of deliver our knowledge and our facts. And then we do fluency, which is the activity. And then we do probing questions, which is an extension of the activity. And then we have further extension to extend the extension, if that makes sense. And then if you have that student that's exceeding all these kind of stages, we'll
All the
have
extensions.
all the extensions, we'll have a risk task, and a risk task would be something where we would I would give a child uh, a technique that nobody else is using, or I would introduce a different artist to a student and encourage that student to maybe try their own version of that artwork, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we consolidate, and some people may call that a preliminary, that kind of thing. So we still have our school structure, which I have to comply with.
Mm.
But again, Oak's resources did not deviate me from that. It
Yeah.
wasn't difficult for me to do that. It's just about, and I even liked the way that it does have the different stages of learning. So I liked the fact that it went from discovering pop art to pop art today, because I know in my head that my course, my project, the unit will go into something of a contemporary outcome. So
Mhm.
yeah, it just all seemed to work really
Lined
well,
up.
despite it not being in the exact same structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm just conscious of time now, but
Yeah.
obviously we mentioned earlier on with Aletia as well about the way the tasks and everything were set up so that they work really well as they are. Um, they're really clear, speak to all different kind of teachers, whether or not art is your specialist subject, whether or not the particular discipline that you're teaching is your specialist. So if you're a textiles teacher, but you're teaching a printing lesson, the
Yeah.
tasks are there and they're really simple and clear. And also before the task, if you were teaching quite an involved skill or technique, that is always broken down for you step by step as well. So if it's a printing task, the explanation slides prior to that would have been like screen grabs or photographs of the
Yeah.
step-by-step stages. So in that way, any teacher should be able to pick up a resource regardless of confidence, competence, experience, and teach them. But
Mm.
you can see here that you've really like taken those tasks, made them included your own tasks, broken them down. I
Yeah.
don't know if there's anything quickly you want to say about the tasks or if it's
I think you're exactly right, Emily. The tasks are very much adaptable. You can use them as they are. It didn't restrict me to any particular material.
yeah,
So how I want to do the task is totally up to me and my discipline or my skills or what I would like the young people to learn. I did actually include this particular task in my slides, my decks, but I thought it wasn't for me. It wouldn't have been a big lesson task, where I
Mhm.
thought maybe primary school, year sixes may have spent more time on your Oak task A and task B.
Yeah,
Whereas for me, I think that would be a quick challenge or a
yeah.
quick
And that makes
activity.
sense because
And
this was a year six lesson that you were adapting for year nine. So that makes
yeah,
total
and that's
sense.
how I would deliver it, rather than it
Yeah.
being like a whole standalone kind of
Yeah.
lesson or a task. 'Cause I mean, with the little ones, you're going to have more time and more resources. So something like this would be sufficient, I believe.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think for my boys, it would be a bit like, what's next? So
Yeah. And
yeah,
it's
so
building up that knowledge, isn't it? And Alicia,
that's
you
it.
would have had eyes on that. And yeah, it's sort of like not that primary is preparation for secondary necessarily in all the ways, but it's kind of if they do this in primary, then by the time they get to you in secondary, they've already had experience of the kind of repetition of pop art and all these other things.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that was really great was the way that you inserted your own imagery and artist references, etc. So obviously Oak reference all sorts of artists and artworks for teachers to research and include. But as Aletia said earlier, you can also, and we really want you to, include any other art and artists that you think are relevant to your
Mhm.
students,
And as you
which,
can see, I kept the writing the same. It was literally
yeah,
just changing the images so that it was more kind of relevant to teenage boys.
yeah, yeah. I love this image. I've never seen that before. I
Yeah,
mean, I know
really.
the original photograph that it's from, but that's such a
Yeah.
great image, yeah. And then yeah, just to your point about keeping the text the same and just changing the decks and the look of the decks.
Yeah.
Um, I know, like I said, within the Oak resources, there are lots of mentions of really diverse and dynamic artworks and artists, and So these were some that weren't in your deck, but I don't know whether you might visit them at a later stage or.
And I think that would be my intention. Again, I didn't want to overwhelm students with a lot of facts.
Yeah.
And I found that these particular artists are quite conceptual pop artists,
Yeah.
which may take away from the kind of the movement as it is. So I thought when it comes to us kind of thinking about outcomes and where we would take our project in the end, I thought maybe it would be good to talk about, different pop artists in different contexts, in different parts of the world, and that kind of stuff, so they can really get their imagination going. It's not just one particular thing. There's a lot of different types of styles of pop art that are still quite relevant to the movement today. So I thought I'd hold back on that because it's quite another meaty topic almost, and it could get quite deep. So I thought I'd hold back on that for now.
And that's, like I said, we've mentioned lots of artists and artworks, and we've also got additional materials which come with the lessons, which will give the teacher a bit more kind of a bio and a bit more context about that artist. And then they can choose when they introduce and when they insert an image in, etc. Well, thank you for sharing that slide deck. I absolutely, as Alicia said, it's so fascinating seeing what people do. Obviously, we've had our heads in these resources for 2 years, and so then to see them being enacted in classrooms and brought to life by teachers, it's just so, it feels so kind of fulfilling and great to see.
I think sorry, I was just going to say that would be something else that could really be adapted and grow is our lessons, although they don't feature images by artists. You'll find that in lots of the lessons there are really beautiful examples of student work, but obviously and it might be that you're starting out on a unit and actually you haven't got examples of that student work, and the Oak examples are perfect for that. But it might be as time goes on, it might be that you're taking examples that are on your walls in your classroom or actually from that class themselves, and you're sort of exchanging our Oak examples of student work for your own class, so they sort of get that sense of ownership and pride. So that's another really key way that lessons can be adapted, actually.
Yeah, and I think it's also, before we go, I think it's also a fantastic resource for, no matter what stage of your teaching career you're in. Like you said, Alicia, if you're somebody who's new to the game and you have no idea of what to do and how it should look, the resources lend itself to that. And if you're somebody who's a bit more experienced and kind of want to just refresh or try something new, it works well. Those resources, the examples and the demonstrations really work well for that. So I think it can satisfy a lot of people.
And credit again to our brilliant team of lesson creators who also, as well as making the lessons and everything else, were making artwork to put in the lessons, which the slides look beautiful and have all these amazing actual artworks in them. Final thing, we've gone over by 1 minute, so if anyone needs to leave, please do. I know it's the start of our Tuesdays, but just very quickly, we've talked about how you can adapt individual lessons, but anything on whether you have to use the whole unit or you have to use all the units for a term or a year, what would you say about that?
I think start small. Try one and see how it goes and then build yourself up. I think it could feel overwhelming when you go in it and you see so much help and so much resources. But I think if you focus on just one particular thing, unit or a lesson, and see what you can appropriate, what you can adapt, I think it's the best way to start. For me, I started with the pop art, and that's why I think it's been so successful, because I've really had time to think about it. But if I did pop art and maybe, I don't know, color theory, and I did maybe 4 other ones, it would feel a bit overwhelming. So start with one and build yourself up.
And once you're in the resources, then they speak for themselves, don't they? And you're like, oh, actually, this is really useful and helpful. Maybe I will look at it for the next term, or I
think as well, if you're coming from a primary school, imagine that you're a primary school teacher and you are teaching your art lessons yourself, and you haven't got an art background, and you've got to hit these national curriculum strands, but you're not quite sure how. I think you may decide that you want to teach a whole unit, because actually I think for people who are already art educators, you can all of the lessons are tagged with different strands. So actually you can look up something in particular, like you might be looking for something to do with digital art. And it might be like Karon took a resource from year 6 and adapted it to year 7. It might be that resource is year 8, but you need it to be year 6, and you are, exchanging, you're taking out some of the more complex ideas, or you're really just focusing on some of those key skills. So you can sort of search quite easily within the Oak curriculum and pull out what you need.
Yeah.
But equally, if you don't have, the background in it, or you're looking for just something to give you some confidence or a starting point, they are sequenced really well. So you actually can just take a whole one if you want to, or you can just dip in and out and take what you need. But what I would say is you don't need to be actually bound by the key, even the key stages or the lessons. You can pull out from different places and kind of sort of mix and match it really based on what you need.
Thank you.
Definitely.
And what I've been working with Karon and her schools on is, first of all, maybe looking at what you've already got and seeing where you need plugging in or extra support, whether it's like, oh, we do no textiles work, or I know that the artists aren't that diverse for this unit, or, we're not even teaching about, so it's like, look at what you've got first, maybe. And also you could just go in and browse. I mean, I love just going into the units and lessons and looking at them. And I still, even though I've seen all of them, I still go into units and lessons and just like, wow, this is so useful. Like, it's just so good, genuinely. So yeah, we could go on and on, I think, because like you said, the adaptability is so broad. But thank you both so much. I know it's the start of your day, and I know, Karon, you're in school, so I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday with your students. And thank you as well so much, Aletia, for coming back, and obviously for all your work over the last 2 years within the project as well. So yeah, thank you both.
Thank you.